Hello, my name is Lisa Allen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am with Rebecca Connors. Her pronouns are she, her, and together we are the Notebooks Collective. Today we are here to introduce Ellen Austen Lee, our friend, previous guest, and luminous poet, and to celebrate the release of her debut collection. In Incidental Pollen, we have a poet whose voice leans into loss after loss instead of looking away. She is open, honest, and rich in her images. Ellen's work is influenced by her years spent as a nurse, but more importantly, in this collection, she confronts the totality of human emotion, grief, and regret, and longing, and the toll grief and addiction take, not just as a nurse or caretaker, but as a mother, sister, wife, and friend. And bees, not just in her poems, in her backyard too, where she tends a hive with her husband.
Lisa and I met Ellen in 2019 at the Solstice MFA program, and we were so lucky to be able to workshop with her and to see her poems take shape in such a vibrant way. We are excited to celebrate her today and the culmination of writing, drafting, revising, and sending out her manuscript with persistence until it found its home at Madville Publishing as the runner up for the 2023 Arthur Smith Poetry Prize. And we're so excited to hear her read and chat with her friend and fellow poet, Pauletta Hansel. Please check out their full bios here, which we will drop links in the chat. And then this will give us more time to welcome Ellen and Pauletta to the Notebooks Collective.
Oh, right.
There's me. There's Pauletta.
Here I am.
Here we are.
I knew I was here someplace.
I know. I'm like, where are
That's
in the squares?
Yeah, so wonderful to see everyone. I know so many of you and know others of you by name as being very important in the life of Ellen and also in the life of the Notebooks Collective. So I'm really honored to be here. I've had the opportunity, as I know several of you have, who are Cincinnati folks or in other places where Ellen has recently presented to get a chance to. I've had a chance to hear her work, and you have as well. But this will be a lot of fun for me and I hope for you, but if not, I'll be having fun. And that's what's really important, right? Having the opportunity to talk to Ellen about this work that I have seen and some of which in many drafts over the many years of our colleagueship and friendship and now having the wonderful opportunity to see in her beautiful books by my co-publisher as well, Madville Publications. Happy to now not just be Ellen's friend and fellow poet, but a fellow Madvillian as well. So what we're going to do is, we think anyway, we'll see what happens, but our current plan is to have Ellen read a few poems, and then we'll stop and talk about themes that have come up as as a result of those poems, and then hear a few more and move on like that as well. We think the time is going to go pretty fast, so I don't know that there'll be time for folks to ask questions or to get involved in the conversation. If there is, that's terrific, but we have a feeling that we're probably going to be using up all the space in this hour. So Ellen, with that, I am going to turn it over to you and ask you to read a couple of poems.
Well, thank you, Pauletta, and thank you so much for taking time out of your such a busy schedule to do this for me.
Oh, I'm
I
thrilled.
appreciate it. I mean, you've been such a big part of my poetry journey, so it feels really great that you're here with me today. And I have to thank everyone who came, all my great poetry friends, and it's just wonderful to see your names and see some of your faces anyways on the screen. And finally, so I don't forget, I really want to thank Becca and Lisa for creating this beautiful space this beautiful community and for having me come here for an hour. And they also were part of my poetry journey, obviously. So it's really special to me that I'm here with the Notebooks Collective. So without much further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of poems. I'm going to start with the title poem for the book, which actually doesn't appear until maybe 2/3 of the way into the book. So it's called Incidental Pollen. So I'll read that, and then I'll follow that with one of the bee poems that there's a thread of bee poems in this book. So, and then Pauletta and I will talk a little bit about these. So, incidental pollen. I watch the bees re-enter the hive in sharp diagonals, laden with nectar, legs golden with furry pockets of pollen. There's no doubt where they belong, drawn as they are instinctively to home. I left mine as soon as I could, certain I would create a version with more belonging, less belief that I was in the wrong place. But wherever I've lived, the same red bricks as my childhood. The farther away I moved, the more the wall encircled. In Amsterdam, music pulled me inside an empty church where I sat in a pew and listened to the organist practice a hymn. The tune I recognized, but the words I couldn't recall. It's too late now. Where I am absent, this sweetness accrues. I linger and feed there. It never empties. Thank you. Thank you. And then I'll read Wild Hive. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about these poems in conversation with Pauletta right after. I do want to tell you a little bit about the backstory to this. My husband, as you heard, is a beekeeper. He's been a beekeeper for at least 10 years. And I'm his apprentice right now because he doesn't want to do it anymore. So, but years back, mutual friends of ours called him to take a swarm of bees, otherwise known as a wild hive, from a tree in their yard. And bring beekeepers do this routinely, and they'll bring the swarm or the wild hive back to their own hive boxes. So that was the genesis of this poem. But it was something, it was the lines that he said at the end that just lived in my head before the poem was born. So, Wild Hive. A rumble summoned my husband last spring to rescue a beehive. He found it hung like a tongue, abuzz with hunger, urgent hooligans hunkering around a honeyed crux. He clipped the bunch cluster, curried the tree branch, and dumped it into a hovel. He had 3 hives at the beginning of winter, but only the mind line survived this time. He thinks there's something wild that keeps things alive.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Pauletta.
Lovely.
Thanks, guys.
So obviously, I mean, with the beginning, as you've started, both with the title, the incidental pollen, which might be useful for you to tell us what that means. I was just reading about it. But, you know, the bees and beekeeping provide a steady hum, or shall I say a steady buzz, and underneath the more personal themes of the book. And I wonder if you'll talk more about how that came to be. I mean, we know a little bit from this poem about your husband's beekeeping and your involvement in that. But how did you begin to integrate this particular interest in all of the various more personal and you know, more personal and societal issues that you were working with, and how did that shape the collection to have this metaphor that hummed underneath?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, there's so many layers to this, but just being through the exposure to, hearing my husband talking about different bees and what they do, my interest was definitely piqued. But I became more purposeful in writing bee poems the summer after my father and my nephew died. My father died in December it was like 8 years ago. And, he was elderly and, it was expected. And, he had a beautiful death as far as death goes. He died at home with all of us around him. But my nephew died 3 weeks later in a car accident, which obviously is very traumatic. And just the proximity of those deaths, and those were the um, first biggest, kind of in my family of origin, those were the most significant losses I had experienced to date. So they had a really big impact on me, really shook me.
Yeah, I
And
know they did.
yeah, so the summer after that, I was out in we have a courtyard behind our house, and I was cleaning up and I noticed I took a break. I'm sitting at the top of these concrete steps that go down to a kind of a drain area outside of the basement door. And I saw, all these, I thought it was leaves. And I went down and looked closer, and they were like 2 inches thick of bee carcasses. And I thought, my husband threw all those dead bees down there for me to sweep up.
That itself might have been an interesting poem, right?
Yes, oh, I know, but so I went like into the house, like, what? Why did you throw those bees there for? I'm sure I didn't say it as nicely as that either, but I just. But he's like, oh, that wasn't me. That was the Undertaker bees. I'm like, Undertaker, what? So he described how different worker bees, have different roles in the hive, and beekeepers have terms for the different roles they all take. And there are undertaker bees that their duty is to remove the bee carcasses from the hive or the hive entrance and place them elsewhere. So it's a room full of poets here. We all know, like, metaphor alert. So it just felt like, I don't know, I felt like kind of lost after my father and nephew had died. And I think that, this metaphor really started me on this journey of like just placing my grief somewhere.
Right.
And
And
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, I'm just, just being an awareness of you as nurse,
Hmm.
in your life. And I wonder, I sort of think about that as you tell the story. I've heard the story before, but I haven't quite put those together, that it's, what does a nurse do when she cannot be part of the healing,
Yeah.
but to hold and protect and the
Hmm.
dead in a way. I mean, that's sort of the extension of the metaphor that
Hmm.
comes to me, that it's that in some ways, and I'm probably stating the obvious here, but
Hmm.
in some ways that these poems themselves are the work of the Undertaker bee, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just, I guess to a certain extent, they're witness poems, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have, there's a poem in there called Nurses, and the there are nurse bees that take care of the larvae
Hmm.
in the hive. And I mean, it's pretty clear within the poem. But um, the human parallel in that poem was another sister of mine is also a nurse, and the two of us took care of my father in his last 3 weeks of life. So we were the nurses in that poem.
Yeah, and Poems of witness, yes, but the witness in these poems has a very close stance. I mean, some
Yes.
witness poems are at a distance, and we're not
Yes.
really sort of we're seeing
Yeah.
we're seeing it through compassionate eyes,
Hmm.
empathetic eyes. But in this case, there's the witness in the, and what is witnessed,
Yeah.
continue to do this
Hmm.
this dance. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about, I'm reading, and I'm assuming you wrote this on the book, but incidental pollen refers to pollen that collects on bees as they
Yes.
forage for nectar,
Yeah.
like the cumulative life experiences we cannot help but carry.
Yeah.
And so everyone, whether witnessed or
Yes.
or being witnessed within your collection, is
Hmm.
carrying this incidental pollen.
Yeah. Well, it's getting back to one part of what you brought up earlier about like how the bees kind of the bee poems tie this together to a certain extent. There are not that many bee poems in this collection,
Mhm.
but the incidental pollen, it's sort of in that description there, but that's a scientific term that I think it's apiologists. I hope I'm saying that wrong, but the scientists that study bees, that's their scientific term for the pollen that's just, you know, um, bees accumulate as they're foraging. So it's just sort of what you pick up along the way. And, when I was putting together this collection, I wasn't, I was more focused on um, the communication between the poems.
Mhm.
So, which using that method kind of took myself a little bit, my logical self
Mhm.
somewhat out of the equation. So it wasn't until I got the collection together and I stepped back and incidental pollen was already in there. I was like, well, what is this about? Because there's all these like pieces from different areas of my life. And then I just realized that it's about like, look, all these different ways I'm like, in my life, as we all do, looking for a place of belonging, looking to create or recreate, as the case may be, a sense of home.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. So in a way, it was like this subconscious process that had been going on for years. It's like first came the poems, and
Mhm.
then you can step back and realize that this has been, at least in that, for this collection, that was my obsession
Mhm.
that I had been writing about in a lot of different ways for years,
Yeah.
and I think it is the process of writing the poems and then putting a collection together that, at least for me, in
Mhm.
this particular book, that's what emerged.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that, and what I'm also hearing is that pairing of unconscious and conscious that happens when we make poems, and when we revise poems. There's always that dance between between those two, those kinds of work, that levels of work. But in putting a book together, especially,
Mhm.
it's you have to have both, and eventually you need to be able to see the patterns, right? Because otherwise
Mhm.
you don't know, you can't make the decisions that you might choose around how those poems speak to each other. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So maybe it's time for some more poems.
Sure. We were the other day when we were talking about what we were going to talk about.
We do that, this might
Yeah.
just seem like it's, sort
Yeah.
of natural and unplanned.
Yes.
We've got it planned down to the very second. not.
Sort of. I mean,
Not,
sort of.
not.
We sort of have a plan.
But we were letting the our conscious and unconscious minds work on this.
Yeah, but like we were going to talk about attraction to form. I mean, there are a lot of poems that are in form in this book, and a lot of also free verse. But my free verse, at least in this collection, tends to be kind of tightly controlled. It's not like you know long lined and super wordy, at least for the most part, I would say in general. So um, I think for me in general, writing in form, um, it's so helpful in so many ways. Well, for one thing, I like the challenge because, the puzzle kind of challenge of it. But I also really, there are things that I am driven to write about that sometimes I don't have a way in.
Mhm.
And having an idea of a form, um, it gives me something to latch onto, and I could start writing in the form and get myself, again, it's for me anyways, it's all about getting my head out of the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
let's hear some of those, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about them more specifically.
Okay. Well, you know what? Since I was talking about Undertaker bees, I'm gonna go ahead and read you that poem. So hang on one second. Here we are. So this is a villanelle. So you'll hear and it's not like these are super easy to write for me either. These form poems, they're not. They take quite a while, but so this is Undertakers. The bodies of the dead are carried, massed in their final resting place, laid away from the hive, unburied. This task falls on shoulders wearied, mahogany boxes, wooden faces. The bodies of our dead are carried. Humans go below ground to be buried. Bees are piled above in the shade, laid away from the hive, unburied. This season, a growing number are tallied, both young and old, with their lives paid. The bodies of the dead are carried, the rhythm of the bees unharried. Their last song hums, don't be afraid, laid away from the hive, unburied. From living to the next, they're ferried. The hive buzzes, like us, they prayed. The bodies of the dead carried, laid away from the hive, unburied.
Wow. Thank you,
So
Ellen.
thank you. There's one that's
Well, let's stop there
okay.
for just a moment, because the villanelle is such an interesting form, I think, and particularly for dealing with grief, right?
Yeah.
Because it keeps forcing you into a place where perhaps you don't want to linger. And also, as you know, since we're talking about bees, I think about, the movement of the bees in and outside, into the hive and back out again.
Mhm.
And and you may not remember your choice around villanelle for this, but if you do, I'm just curious, was there a consciousness of that, or did you find it? Within the writing, is there one line that you began with? I mean, if you want to just talk a little bit about your process there, if you can remember. I know
Yeah.
it's been a while.
I think this is probably true with all of us as writers, but there are so many different influences that are going on kind of simultaneously. And for me, it's kind of rare for a poem to come out of like one writing endeavor. Once in a while that happens, but usually there are pieces, that are influencing this. And I think this one, I told you the story already about learning about the Undertaker bees.
Right.
So I felt very compelled by that. But also, the most famous villanelle we probably all know is the Dylan Thomas one. And after my father died, we found in this basket, he was a physician. And so we found in this basket on his desk all these clippings from um, newspaper articles about different writers and poets, and then a list in his shaky handwriting of these books he wanted to read. But we found in his a part of his wallet a copy that he carried around in his wallet of that poem.
Wow.
So I thought, I don't know, I'm like, this has to be a villanelle. That was like one of those I knew this has to be a villanelle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I don't know, one of those I follow signs, and
Uh-huh.
that was a sign to me. And
Yeah.
yeah. And there's something very elegiac sounding in a villanelle with the repetition and the rhyme and the regular the rhythm of it, not the meter if you're writing in strict meter, which I don't, but I do keep the rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of what informed that poem. Yeah. I don't think I ever told you that one.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's hear more.
Okay, shall I go ahead and read? I wanted to read a palindrome,
Okay.
and there's two in this book. And
now I know how you found out about palindromes.
Yes, I was just going to say that. When I started the Solstice MFA graduate program, which there's, Lisa and Becca, and I saw Meg Hardy's in here, and a couple other people, Lisa Sullivan. I can't call you all out right now. Kathy, let this up there. But before I started the Solstice program, I had just finished one of Pauletta's workshops, or at least within the past year. And it was when you had worked on palindrome.
Yeah.
And one of Pauletta's like amazing poetry collections. And in fact, she won the Weatherford poetry. I can't remember the whole title of the award, but the Weatherford Award, which is
just say an award is enough.
Okay, she won an award, but it's just a beautiful book. But Pauletta kind of I just got hooked on palindromes, and again, they're very challenging for me. They're very challenging to write to get them to work.
Yeah. Do you want to explain what it is?
Yeah. I'm sure most of you know what they are, or otherwise known as mirror poems, but you write the poem, the first stanza, or however you format it, and just the lines, and then you invert it in the second stanza, or however you put it together, but it's an inversion of the exact same words. So this is called Lost Palindrome, and this is actually the night that my father died. And there's a you in this poem, which is my nephew who died, the one who died 3 weeks later. So I don't often get to tell that to people, but it kind of gives it a little bit more of a richness to know that. So it's called Lost Palindrome. The last time I looked into your eyes, they were pools unspilled, deep on a late December night. Soft yellow light through the living room into shadows lit the deathbed. Our beloved father, none of us knew you would soon follow him as the great stag passed into the dark, the sweep of loss. As the great stag passed into the dark, you would soon follow him. None of us knew. Our beloved father lit the deathbed through the living room into shadows, soft yellow light, deep on a late December night. They were pools unspilled the last time I looked into your eyes.
Thank you, Ellen.
And just another point of interest on that one is the great stag passed into the night. Literally after my father died, this buck with a huge rack walked in front, like my father's hospice bed was in the living room. walked right in front of the living room window.
Wow.
And it was just like, to me, life is so filled with these synchronicities, and I just feel compelled to put them in my work, you know.
Well, and you pay attention, which I think is it's one of your gifts, and it's the gift of poet, but it is I think a particular gift for you and for others who are determined to work to use life, to use our lives and our personal experiences to make art.
Mhm.
And I'm just gonna stop here for a minute. I want to hear more poems, but I want to just ask you this question, and I'll preface this by saying that I know that when I wrote my book Palindrome, which is about the death of actually, my mother wasn't dead when I wrote it, but
Yeah.
her journey into dementia and my journey with her. Even though I always write personal material, it felt to me like the most personal of any of my books thus far. And it was so important to me that the personal material not overwhelm the craft.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's been any similarity for you, and if your choice around form, and even if it's not in form, tightly crafted poems was part of that for you as well. And you might also just tell the story that you had told me about being sort of called out in a panel for writing personal material.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting story, but I don't know if I should start with that. Maybe I'll start with that.
Okay.
It was just a reading that I was in. It was a virtual reading, and there was a memoirist and another poet, and myself. And so the memoirist went first, and um, I can't remember if I was second or third, doesn't matter. But there was a Q&A afterwards, and uh, somebody on the panel asked me. I literally I read one poem. We were just kind of like the two poets were kind of fluff with me. But so
Decoration.
that we were decoration. So we just had like one or two poems to read, and maybe I did read two. But one of the poems I read, my brother had I spent an entire day writing this poem because I was so shocked to learn that my brother had a terminal illness. And um, so as we do, I sat in front of the computer in my robe all day long, never got dressed until like, I gotta get this down, like how this makes me feel. So I read this poem because I don't know. It was maybe one of my more recent poems, and how we tend to think those are our best ones, the ones we just wrote. So somebody in the Q&A asked me about, how it felt or whatever to write and read, such personal information. And I was a little taken back by it because I felt like it was just a very especially this particular poem was very uh, praising of my brother, and like there was nothing controversial in it at all, and it was really just kind of how I looked at him how I viewed him as kind of a hero of mine growing up, and in
And
fact
plus, you just read with a memoirist, for heaven's
yeah,
sake,
exactly.
right?
And actually, and then I said something about how I sent it to my brother and he loved it. And they were like, "Oh, that's good. That's good." Like almost like I needed permission. And I wanted to say, "Well, geez, it was just a really, beautiful poem. Why wouldn't he not?" It just was letting him know how much I loved him. But I found it really interesting because yeah, the memoirist kind of interrupted and he said, "Well, I do the same thing, you know, and I was the only female reader." And I thought that was interesting because that was my takeaway is it's just something right or wrong that I feel like when we include any personal details from our lives as women, it just I feel like it gets called out more.
Right. Women are confessional and men are brutally honest.
Yeah,
What
or
can you say?
something. And I don't know. But there was another part to that
Yeah,
question.
there was, and I got you off track, but it was, did you feel like is it consciously or unconsciously or both was your choice to include form and very tightly crafted poems in this personal material part of a way to balance, I suppose, the personal nature?
Yeah, I think in general, at least for me, that again, it's getting myself out of the way, and it's
Mhm.
I if I focus more on the craft, um, what I want, like the what I want to come through, the honesty that I want to come through is delivered in a way that at least I hope is not bogged down in sentimentality. That's something that I personally have to like
Mhm.
work with and on is um, my heart is so there in my work, and not that I want to hide my heart. I don't mean it
Right,
like that at all.
right.
Um, but I I don't want to be off-putting to a reader.
Mhm.
I want to find a balance that conveys the emotion without being overdone. And I feel that if I focus on the craft, that kind
Mhm.
of takes care of that for me.
Mhm.
Does
Yeah.
that answer the
Mhm.
question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have another poem?
Yes. Let's see. I think I'm going to read. I had flagged that I wanted to read The Gauntlet because I never read that.
Okay.
And it's not in form, but it's you know, we had talked about writing. We were just talking about writing personal things, and the Gauntlet's very much about my alcoholism and recovery. But it's a wee poem,
Mhm.
so it hopefully has more of a universal appeal, at least to people that um, you know, like people that have also suffered with this
Mhm.
kind of thing. And this is, even though it's not in form, you can see that you'll see that I use a lot of, I think, a lot of simile and metaphor that
Mhm.
helps me represent the truth
Mhm.
a little more easily. The Gauntlet. Once our world was a field of undetonated mines, probable explosions when our feet swung over morning's edge, clods of mud raining, stuck in the muck. Once every mammal was predator, fanged and clawed. We wrestled wild animals, moved in slow motion. Each clash stopped, then replayed in technicolor splashes. Once we carved our arms with sharp knives, blood scores, a tally of stripes to feed the deep hole in our souls. Earth people shake their heads. Don't get the rattle. We had long since switched water for Beaujolais, wild turkey, or bitter hops. Once we called the magician behind the counter our savior of the corner liquor store. Our skin once the ashtray of extinguished cigarettes. Cognac, elegant elixir, dexedrine, slimming smarts. Our bodies dwindled, our thoughts soared until they didn't. Once we were the dregs, the drags, the dreaded, scraped dog shit from a shoe. That was us once, before we passed through the smoke filled gauntlet and pulled our aluminum folding chairs into a circle,
Wow.
as
That's
we all do in the
wonderful.
church basements.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, Ellen, thank you. I've read that, but I haven't heard you read it. That was very powerfully read as well as on the page.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I want to, and I know we've been talking about form, and I know we're going to kind of move into speaking more soon about community, but I'm going to back up a minute to ask you one other question, if you'd be willing to answer. And I happen to know that there are some people in this room who would like to hear.
Oh,
And that is, your first book was Firefly, which really was dealing very much more specifically with this particular journey in your life around alcoholism. And then the second was Lockdown, which was very specific again around our pandemic days and weeks and years and eons, as it felt. And now you've moved with the third book. Both of those were chat books that oftentimes have very specifically, sort of tight themes. And now with Incidental Pollen, you moved into full length where there's still these themes woven through, but it's much kind of it's broadened out as well. And I wonder if you would spend just a few minutes maybe talking about the difference between putting together a chapbook and putting together a full length.
sure. Okay, well, chapbook, well, as you know, my first chapbook, I took your manuscript class. So the thing that was helpful for me with that was, well, we were using Ordering the Storm. I can't remember who put that compilation together, but they're essays from different poets with all their different like kind of methods and words of wisdom about, the how-tos. And so that was very helpful. But both of those I knew going into the chapbooks what I wanted them to be kind of about. And so there was already, kind of a structure all preset. Whereas I think you probably picked up on early in our conversation, the full length collection was more, the poems were there. And then it was in the process of putting them together that the theme emerged. And so that was much more, I think that probably from talking to other people, that's a first full length collection experience is having poems from all different eras of your life, or just more of a sweeping collection than perhaps later collections would be.
Yeah.
I know some people go into a full length collection with an intention. I think I have an intention for my next, at least I did until I was derailed this past year by family things, but I had an intention for my next collection. So I'm kind of writing more towards something than, I don't know if that.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense that it's in your first full length, it's you are using the various obsessions and interests and creating a weave or creating a fabric from what is there.
Mhm.
And that may be true, throughout, for some of us, perhaps that's true throughout our careers as writers, but
Mhm.
sometimes, that when we become more conscious of those themes and obsessions, we begin mining them more specifically. And it sounds like that's what you're doing for your second poem.
I think so, unless
Or
that
something happens.
changes.
Yeah.
I mean, life has happened, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. That
you know, I,
incidental pollen gets you every time.
yeah, it does. I mean, now, like I find I'm writing on so many different tracks. I don't know exactly what's going on, but that's kind of how it was for this too.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I had the impetus with my first collection that this is pretty much my creative thesis for Solstice for my
Yeah.
MFA.
Right.
It's expanded somewhat from my creative thesis, but so there was that motivation too, and there was that luck, if you will, having a devoted mentor to a captive a captive audience to your every self-doubt. That was probably the most beautiful part of that experience for me is my mentor for my creative thesis, Laurent Basselar, who's just absolutely phenomenal. Her big thing with me was trust your gut. Trust your gut. She's like, just you have a good gut, she would say to me. Trust your gut. In fact, she told me to type it out into giant letters and print it out and hang it above my computer. But what I really needed at that point in my writing was that's what I needed at that point in my writing. I needed a cheerleader or something, a guiding hand to help me dispel those doubts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that
Yeah.
that person was there for you.
Yeah. It was.
So that we have this book.
Yes. Thank you.
And let's hear some more poems from it.
Okay. All right. I think we had talked about, do you want me to go into the writing and community thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And just to know, we've got a little more than 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've got time for that, and then before the closing poem.
All right. I'm going to read a short poem that I don't think I've ever read anywhere. So I'm going to read this one. And this is one of those tightly tight free verse poems. And I am choosing to read this one because so much of what I've written in community with many people that are in this group. And this one I wrote at one of my favorite writing retreats here, the River Retreat. And our theme this particular session was home and all its guises. And I had just returned from being in my home in upstate New York, my family of origins home. And this was a visit to a place called Delphi Falls and waterfall, and it's with my mother, who's very much on my mind these days, and my oldest sister, who I just lost this past year. So I want to read this because they're both in here. Delphi Falls. The distant drumming of water grew to a pounding thunder as we drew closer to the falls. We edged nearer on the scrabble path, plunged into refrigerated shade under the tuck of the cliff. My sister and I leaned in to hear our mother's stories, our voices raised above the din of the oracle's timpani, her white hair misted dark as she recalled her younger day, dancing square and round there in the nut brown pavilion overlooking the gorge. We three turned silent as we watched the bridal veil fan across the granite.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna.
I was going to say, let's hear a few more.
I'm gonna read. I never read this one, and I'm gonna read the beginning poem to the second section, and it's called "Someday I'll Love You," Ellen Austin Lee. And it's an after poem. And that's why I'm choosing to read this because, the whole idea of writing in community, this is a poem written in community, so to speak, with poets that came before me, which I think is a lot of poetry, is the communication between poets. And so this started as a palimpsest or a translation poem after Ocean Vuong's version of "Someday I'll Love You."
And you want to just say briefly what a palimpsest?
Yeah, it's basically using another poet's poem, almost like a tracing. So you replace nouns, articles, verbs with your own.
Right.
So it's interesting because recently I heard some controversy over this because, the people at this presentation were saying that this is like stealing someone's syntax, or which I thought was interesting. But anyway, um, we all have our opinions. But Ocean's poem is in response to, the original line, "Someday I'll love you," comma, and insert name, is from a line of Frank O'Hara's in his poem Katie. So he says it within that poem, "Someday I'll love you,"
Yeah.
Frank O'Hara. And obviously that's a very compelling line because we all have our questions about, well, why aren't we
Yeah.
better to ourselves? Why don't,
Yeah.
anyways, that's, I do. And then I also referenced Roger Reeves, who also wrote a really great version of that. And there are a whole collection of these poems, but so I'll read this. "Someday I'll love you, Ellen Austen Lee. You've always known fear rivers your blood, the familiar we run toward, though we know those rocks will break us. Listen, though your father is gone, he still lives. Like how the dying oak drops a multitude of acorns from its arms, shelling in its shadow. Ellen, do you hear the report? You're breaking open beneath the canopy where he once stood. The name your mother gave you means shining light, though you made childhood a cave where you couldn't see your own hands. This fear, call it darkness, and you stay trapped inside. It has to mean something that every man who entered you was from a country farther away, like you were penciling in an outline of who you were supposed to be, how you did this over and over again to prove yourself beautiful. Forgive fear. Silence is a place where you learn to make noise. Ellen, keep moving. Your flesh will materialize along the way. And don't stop, or you'll erase your place in the world. There's a clearing where all you've lost gathers. The dead grab your pen and imprint on the page. The ink blinks blue as you save them. I'm not sure, but maybe you'll blaze and write yourself into being.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, as I'd ask you, I'd ask you to read that poem, I think, as we were talking before. I think that was one of the ones that I was really interested in hearing. And as I'm hearing it now, I'm thinking about what you had told me that you have felt like the kind of underlying themes of this collection is the search for belonging,
Mhm.
but also the search for self-identity.
Yes.
And that poem seems to speak so clearly to that. And because we're speaking about it within kind of the context of writing communities, it strikes me, that's what the best of the writing communities do for us, right? That they both allow us to be part of something larger than ourselves, but to be more purely ourselves
Mhm.
in that community.
Yeah, and in a way, again, it's almost like, right, like this particular poem for me was almost like writing in form. It is kind of writing in form. And I mean, these are very deep truths for me in this, the fear,
Yeah.
and how it affects me. And so it's beautiful to be able to express these things because I feel like expressing them lessens their hold on us, and,
Mm-hmm.
and sharing them. Um, I mean, I think it helps other people to hear, like, oh, somebody else like struggles with self-love and
certainly Ocean Young's helped you, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
now you can
He's
pass.
very vulnerable in his
Yeah.
writing. He's, he's very vulnerable. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's been important for me to be
Yeah.
vulnerable in my writing, just to be. I feel like I spent so many years of my life hiding
Mhm.
from myself and from other people that that's been it compels me now to be open, more open
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
So if we have time, I can like wrap with the last two poems. Do we
That'd
have
be
time
great.
for
I think
that?
that's perfect.
Okay.
We've got about 4 minutes, and that
Okay, great. I'll take us out on.
unless they're epics, I think we've got plenty of time for both.
Neither one are. They're both very short. I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read Speaking of identity, I decided I'm gonna read. Um, the last two poems are pretty much identity poems. I'm gonna read Two Queens, and that's if I can get it open. Here we go. So this is self-explanatory. I'm just going to read it. Two Queens. I am the spent queen, this crown tarnishing. I'm aware you prepare to replace me. You see, I sense royal jelly stirring in the nearby cell, some lowly bee soaking in the bath, her body jeweled as she receives. How quickly I'm deposed. Since I can no longer produce a brood, my body shrivels to nothing, disposed. I am the virgin queen, a tremble, a rose soon to take her place, the risen star above the old crone. I'm worshipped by drones, perfumed by this new spring's nectar. I don't dwell on season's end. I take wing, hover above the hive. I feel no sting.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks. And I'll take us out with Pika. And this is my opening poem to the book. And this is one of those poems that came out fully formed, just like, and it's one of my earliest memories. So, Pika, baby girl in the bushes, I scooped handfuls of dirt, the minerals the body craved at my fingertips, taste of metal, the earth's iron, hand to mouth, one gritty girl. Then a proclivity for paper captured on film, crawling Christmas morning in heaven, grazing the wasteland of wrapping paper scraps. We eat what we need, the ground and the seed, a forest already growing inside me.
Thank you, Ellen. And I would invite folks, if you want to unmute to clap hard or go woo, 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 feel free to. Otherwise, we will know you're doing it behind the scenes.
Woohoo!
Wonderful.
Yay,
Wonderful.
amazing.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so glad you are here. Y'all bring tears to my eyes.
I'll find you to get a signature in this.
Oh, hi, Mom. Well, I didn't even know you were here. Oh,
We'll waive
thanks
our
again, everybody.
We'll waive our books.
Thanks, everybody, for being
I need
here.
a signature so I can sell it for more expensive on eBay.
Oh.
Well, we wanted to say thank you to everyone for attending and joining us and celebrating Ellen and her debut collection. And we just invite you all to check out our website at thenotebookscollective.com. And, we have other events coming up soon and classes and all fantastic things. And thank you to Pauletta and Ellen for giving us this amazing conversation and such beautiful poems.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go forth and be cool. Stay cool, everybody.
Yes.
That's right.
Have a great evening.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Love you guys.
See some of you very soon.